The early 1980s established a whole spectrum of new pop culture mythologies that today are still driving vast chunks of the economy. Action figures, comic books, cartoons, video games, bed sheets, cereals, they moved a lot of product. They influenced an entire generation of kids daily, hours at a time in front of their TV screens. And while you might expect that making a live-action feature-length film was just the next step in the brand's life cycle, the success rate for toy-inspired properties at the box office at the time was quantifiably not good, because the reality of adapting the sometimes wonky mythologies of those brands within the rigid corporate constraints and budgetary limitations is, frankly, impossible, even for the most powerful brand in the universe. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Masters of the Universe, the motion picture. Alright, it wasn't impossible to adapt a hugely successful toy-inspired property to live action for the big screen, because it absolutely did happen in 1987 with Masters of the Universe. Produced by Golan Globus Films, distributed by Canon Films, directed by Gary Goddard, who was already working with Mattel on Captain Power, with a script by David Odell, it was poised to be the Star Wars of the 80s. Or at least the next Star Wars of the 80s. Or at least the 80s that were left. A cinematic blend of swords and sorcery, laser fights, robots and spaceships. On paper, Masters of the Universe was a lock, especially when you consider that the brand did over $400 million in sales the year before in 1986, and had been growing in leaps and bounds with each successive year that it was in existence up until then. Fresh off his success as the hated Russian boxer Ivan Drago in the fourth installment of the Rocky franchise, He-Man was the first starring role for Dolph Lundgren and probably set some kind of record for the biggest heel-face turn in character performance history. This time, Dolph would be squaring off against Tony Award-winning Frank Langella's Skeletor, where Dolph was expected to be a spectacle of human composition, to look the part and swing the sword. Langella's Skeletor would ham it up like ham was going out of style, and the only way to save it was to make more ham. Despite Lundgren and Langella's looks and performances, there is very little about the movie that evokes the cartoon, and there's a good reason for that. The movie isn't based on the cartoon. It was never trying to be the cartoon. It's based on the toys. A distinction without a difference? Masters of the Universe began as a toy line from Mattel in 1982 with a mythology developed for the toy line. The mythology was to be kind, flexible, and it was communicated through the mini-comics included with the toys and the commercials for the toys. Before the cartoon aired a year later in 1983, He-Man was a friendly barbarian who acquired some ancient weapons from a sorceress to become the champion of Eternia. In the early mini-comics, there's no such thing as Prince Adam or a transformative moment with the iconic "I have the power" statement. Skeletor spends more time at Castle Grayskull than He-Man does. Nearly all of the things that we associate with He-Man and Masters of the Universe at large come from the Filmation animated series. But Filmation had no input on the movie. The movie was a production of Canon Films and Mattel. Canon brought the budget and movie-making know-how. Mattel brought the license and the value that came with it. Mattel was excited to showcase their extensive line of action figures. Canon was confident that they could deliver a hit film and maybe set up a whole trilogy of movies that would power Canon and Mattel through the next decade.
I warned you! I tell you!
But Mattel couldn't help themselves when it came to requests and restrictions on the production. They wanted to see all of the characters, but didn't want anything lasting to happen. He-Man should fight bad guys and win, but he can't kill anyone, drink, smoke, curse, probably don't want a love interest, nothing that might taint the brand and appeal of that brand to their core demographic of kids who imagine themselves as all-powerful supermen with no time or purpose for kissing. Canon provided a $22 million budget, which even in 1986 doesn't go as far as you might think. They had two other projects that had the potential to be long-term multi-film franchises as well. Canon's goal was to produce the Spider-Man film that they had acquired the rights to in 1985. But before that, they decided to use half of Spider-Man's money for He-Man and the other half for a fourth installment of the Superman franchise to be released in 1987. They would take the profits from Masters of the Universe and Superman 4 and use it to deliver the most amazing Spider-Man visual spectacle the world has ever seen. How could a plan like that possibly fail?
I warned you! I tell you!
In order to focus on and develop a strong, relatable narrative and keep from blowing the budget, the Masters of the Universe production had to find a way to limit the number of characters and special effects involved. Sacrifices were going to have to be made. No Orko, no Battle Cat, no Buzz-Off or Stratos or She-Ra, or even really much of anything on Eternia or in, around, or near Castle Grayskull. Most of the film is set on Earth in modern day and follows the adventures of two teens, Julie Winston and her boyfriend, Kevin Corrigan, and a New Jersey detective as they attempt to understand and utilize the secrets of the Cosmic Key. The Cosmic Key is an Eternian tool developed by a character named Gwildor that gives the user the ability to transport people, ships, creatures, all kinds of stuff across space and time. Our New Jersey heroes are joined in their quest by He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Tila, who together protect the plucky Earthlings from Skeletor's forces, which are attempting to retrieve the key for Skeletor so he can finally take over the city, state, planet, universe, dimension, whatever. The film opens and closes on Eternia, setting up Skeletor's capture of Castle Grayskull and the presumed final resolution of his fight against He-Man. But, in a big surprise to fans of the toys and cartoon, a lot of it does take place in New Jersey, and I gotta be honest, that any of it took place in New Jersey was quite the surprise to first-time viewers who were intimately familiar with the cartoon.
Preview audiences have already discovered a new hero.
He-Man! It's action. It's nothing but action.
Skeletor!
Skeletor is a madman. He's bad.
Great movie.
Dolph Lundgren is He-Man. Frank Langella is Skeletor.
It was so much like Star Wars, and I love Star Wars. He-Man fought.
Masters of the Universe, rated PG. Starts tomorrow at theaters everywhere.
For whatever the movie was, for wherever it took place, it didn't hit the notes of the mythology conveyed in the opening theme for the cartoon day after day after day, and perhaps that's why the film was a box office and critical failure. Because it was, with a budget of $22 million, a total gross of $17 million in ticket sales is unequivocally a failure. Unbeknownst to the production, during the production, Canon Films was going bankrupt, and Mattel's sales on Masters of the Universe toys had dropped off precipitously. Nearing the end of production, realizing that this film may, in fact, be the final make-or-break moment for the Masters of the Universe as a franchise, Mattel took the creative handcuffs off director Gary Goddard, allowing whatever characterization he wanted for He-Man as long as Canon delivered a hit that would get them back in the black financially. Of course, at that point, it was too late. The majority of the film was shot, cuts had been made to the story and action sequences all over the place, and the only thing left to do was cobble together a final battle scene that at least put the characters in a position to close off this narrative and maybe tease at a potential sequel if things went well once the film was actually released. In its opening weekend, it was the third highest grossing film in North America, just behind Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez in Stakeout, and Timothy Dalton James Bond flick The Living Daylights, not the kind of results you would expect from the Star Wars of the 80s. While it was never produced, while it could never be produced, development for a Masters of the Universe sequel had begun before the ultimate fate of the first film, the line of action figures, and Canon's future were determined. Masters of the Universe 2 Cyborg told the story of He-Man's eventual return to Earth with She-Ra to again battle Skeletor. This time, Skeletor had come to Earth long before He-Man and established himself with an alternate identity as an industrialist named Aaron Dark, who was responsible for laying waste to a significant portion of the livable planet. He-Man would attempt to thwart his plans disguised as a professional football quarterback? They were going to double down on the Earth stuff? I think this is the plan for the Flash Gordon sequel, isn't it? Dolph Lundgren declined the opportunity to appear in the sequel. In 1989, he stated that Masters of the Universe, at the time, was his lowest point as an actor. At the time. The writer Albert Pyun was also set to direct. He-Man was recast with professional surfer Laird Hamilton, who definitely looked the part. But the failure of both Masters of the Universe and Superman 4 left Canon Films on the verge of bankruptcy, and Mattel could not carry the production financially themselves. Writer-director Pyun would grab all the sets, costumes, and dialogue that he could carry and recycle them for the 1989 film Cyborg starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Spider-Man would have to wait another decade before making it to the big screen. Thanks, Superman and He-Man! You can still take the adventure home. Masters of the Universe, the motion picture, was released on DVD in October of 2001. A more substantial 25th anniversary edition Blu-ray disc found its way to the shelves from current rights holder Warner Brothers in 2012. Or if you live in New Jersey, just take a walk around outside and relish in the thought that this is what beat out Eternia for the place to tell He-Man's story. Masters of the Universe didn't refresh the toy line the way Mattel had hoped. They supplemented the line with a small assortment of new characters from the film, including Blade, Sorod, and Gwildor, and it's possible that they had plans for a wider assortment of movie-inspired figures. The last He-Man figure released as part of the original line, Laser Power He-Man, has a new head that some say looks an awful lot like Dolph Lundgren, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Fans would have to wait 32 years before toy company Super 7, current holder of the Masters of the Universe license, would announce official releases of modern versions of Skeletor and He-Man based on the movie designs. Billed as the William Stout Collection, named for the production designer for the film, the 4-figure assortment finally delivers Lundgren He-Man and 2 different Langella Skeletors, or at least reasonable facsimiles thereof, and likely the closest you're ever going to see due to likeness and licensing issues. There have been several, there have been a multitude, there have been lots and lots, there have been many announcements, hirings, false starts, rights acquisitions. There have been too many writers, directors, production companies attached to a potential Masters of the Universe reboot film that I cannot take the time to list them all. That said, on February 13th, 2019, a report stated that principal photography should begin in July of 2019 for a Masters of the Universe film directed by brothers Aaron and Adam Nee with a script by David Goyer. Masters of the Universe, the motion picture, was released at the best possible time in history that a Masters of the Universe motion picture could have been released. Hot toy line, hot cartoon, hot cast, everything was hot. The only thing that could have stopped it from being a huge success was falling short of the very low fan expectations, which it did. But in the intervening years, since its release, its bad qualities and the story behind it have allowed it to transcend bad to become cult. It is now revered by fans for precisely what it is, a time capsule of the era in which it was made, a snapshot of fantastic intergalactic adventurers with cosmic power fighting to save the universe from the forces of evil in New Jersey. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. Take a quick look through our merch down below this video, but before the comments, maybe see if there's anything in there that you might like to decorate your torso with. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy and let us know in the comments down below the merch, if you saw the Masters of the Universe movie in theaters, or if you encountered it in the years after, or if you're just as well skipping that one and waiting for whatever the future holds. Good or bad?
Probably bad.
Uh-oh.
Cut.